Hey, Jesse Randolph Singer here with UFO TV. Today we're going to be presenting you with the top 10 UFO crash retrievals of all time. Now I know you're thinking to yourself, I know about Roswell, I know about 1947. Well, guess again. There's been a plethora of ET craft that have crashed on this planet. So today we're going to present you with the top 10 cases, the top 10 UFO crash retrievals of all time. Come on, let's do it. Coming in at number 10, the Rendlesham Forest UK UFO crash. The Rendlesham Forest incident is the name given to a series of reported sightings of unexplained lights and the alleged landing of a craft or multiple craft of unknown origin in Rendlesham Forest, Suffolk, England in late December 1980. Just outside RAF Woodbridge, used at the time by the United States Air Force. Now, dozens of United States Air Force personnel were eyewitnesses to various events over a 2 to 3 day period. It is the most famous UFO event to have ever happened in Britain. It's basically their Roswell, ranking among the best known UFO cases worldwide as well. Now, the UK Ministry of Defense denied that the event posed any threat to national security. They also stated it was never investigated as a security matter at all. Later, evidence indicated there was a substantial MOD file on the subject, which led to claims of a cover-up. Some interpreted this as part of a larger pattern of information suppression concerning the true nature of unidentified flying objects by both the United States and the British governments. One person to take this view was eyewitness and deputy base commander at the time, Colonel Charles Halt.
The aftermath is quite interesting. It's very obvious there was a great deal more interest than was ever publicly or openly admitted to anybody, including the senior officers on the base.
Another was former NATO head and UK Chief of the Defence Staff, Lord Peter Hill Norton.
If indeed what he says took place did take place, and why on earth should he make it up, then surely the entry of a vehicle from outer space, certainly not man-made, to a defence base in this country also cannot fail to be of defence interest.
However, when the file was released in 2001, it turned out to consist mostly of internal correspondence and responses to inquiries from the public. Now, skeptics note that the lack of in-depth investigation in the publicly released documents is consistent with the MOD's earlier statements that they never took the case seriously. Included in the released files is an explanation given by the defense minister as to why the MOD did not investigate further. The sightings have been officially dismissed as misinterpretation of a series of nocturnal events, a fireball, the Orford Ness Lighthouse, and bright stars. Come on. But according to eyewitness testimony, around 3 a.m. on the 26th of December 1980, strange lights were reported by a security patrol near the east gate of RAF Woodbridge. Now, these are experts, apparently descending into nearby Rendlesham Forest. Servicemen initially thought it was a downed aircraft, but upon entering the forest to investigate, they saw, according to Halt's memo, this is the base commander, a strange glowing object, metallic and triangular in appearance, with colored lights. As they approached, it moved through the trees, and the animals on the nearby farm went into a frenzy. The craft left 3 impressions or depressions in the ground that were visible the next day. Now, one of the servicemen, this is important, Sergeant Jim Peniston, later claimed to have encountered a craft of unknown origin and to have made detailed notes of its features, get this, touched its warm surface, and copied the numerous symbols on its body. Peniston's statements is the only one to this day that positively identifies a mechanical object as the source of the lights.
The closer we got, the more the white light dissipated, but what appeared was a triangular craft When we approached it, it was, I say it measured probably about 9 feet long, maybe 6 feet high, a little higher, maybe 6.5 feet. The lighting emanated from the fabric of the craft, and it would actually move around. I mean, it would move. You'd have different locations where maybe a little blue lighting was going into it, or maybe a little red. And then there must have been some type of lighting underneath of it, because it silhouetted the aircraft itself.
He states that he was within 160 feet of the object, and it, quote, was definitely mechanical in nature, end quote. The object allegedly flew away after the brief encounter, and he also claimed to have seen triangular landing gear on the object while undergoing regression hypnosis in 1994. Peniston subsequently claimed that the craft he encountered had come from our future and was occupied by time travelers, not extraterrestrials. But it goes down as number 10 on our countdown. At number 9, the Del Rio UFO crash. Retired Colonel Robert B. Wellingham, 84 years old, says he visited the site of a crashed unidentified flying object near Del Rio, Texas in 1955, and saw 3 non-human entities through a hole in the ruptured hull of the ship. The strange beings, 2 of which were badly mangled, appeared to have died in the crash. Quote, "It didn't look like humans to me," Willingham stated. The retired aviator said the beings he saw fit the common description of UFO occupants with large heads, slit-like mouths, and arms like broomsticks. Asked how the dead entities were clothed, he replied, "They weren't dressed at all." He said that despite the mangled condition of the bodies, he does not even recall seeing traces of blood around the creatures. A lieutenant later told him that they were waiting for the U.S. Air Force to arrive in order to turn the object over to them. It was while talking to the lieutenant, whose name he remembers only as Martinez, that Willingham caught a glance of the 3 dead creatures inside the wrecked UFO. He reluctantly got back in his small plane, but not before picking up a chunk of metallic debris about the size of his hand and stuck it in a pocket in his flight suit. Upon further examination back in Fort Worth, Willingham found that the metallic debris had properties unlike any metal known to Earth science. Attempts to burn it, cut it with a torch, and deform it in any manner were totally unsuccessful. The curved piece of silvery gray metal was highlighted by a honeycomb pattern of holes on each end and metallic ridges along the edges. Willingham possessed the unearthly metal for several days before he was ordered to surrender it to a marine metallurgic laboratory in Maryland, from where it mysteriously disappeared. Days later, in an obvious military intelligence cover-up, Willingham received threatening phone calls from intelligence operatives warning him to never disclose any of what he had seen down on the border. Willingham is a highly credible witness who served in World War II and was at one time a personal assistant to General George S. Patton. At number 8, the San Antonio, New Mexico UFO crash. Remy Baca and Jose Padilla were young boys living in San Antonio, New Mexico in August 1945, when they say they literally stumbled across the remains of what they believe to have been an alien spacecraft. Their personal account of the case displays many of the key ingredients of crashed UFO lore. According to Baca and Padilla, soldiers in army fatigues loaded the shattered remains of a flying apparatus onto a huge flatbed truck and hauled it away. He and Jose were looking for a lost cow when they accidentally came upon the crash site. Quote, "What we saw was a long, wide gash in the earth with a manufactured object lying cockeyed and partially buried at the end of it, surrounded by a large field of debris. We believed then and believe today that the object was occupied by distinctly non-human life forms, which were alive and moving about on their arrival minutes after the crash, end quote. They reported their findings to Jose's father Faustino, on whose ranch the craft had crashed. Shortly thereafter, Faustino received a military visitor asking for permission to remove it. It was then that a lieutenant sergeant named Avila arrived at the Padilla home asking permission to tear down part of the fence adjoining the cattle guard on the property. They needed to install a metal gate in order to drive in a flatbed truck to recover one of their experimental weather balloons that had been reported to have accidentally crashed there. It wasn't long before the Army was on the scene with road building equipment. According to Jose, 4 soldiers were stationed at the wreckage at all times with shift changes every 12 hours. Once the flatbed was in place, the soldiers used winches and a crane to hoist the intact portion of the wreckage into an L-shaped frame that was tilted to fit the object into the trailer. The object was covered with a tarp and prepared to haul away. Baca and Padilla say they are planning an expedition to investigate and unearth the remains of whatever crashed in the desert near San Antonio in August 1945. Was a clandestine military operation undertaken to recover a weather balloon, or was something more mysterious involved? Baca and Padilla intend to prove that it was an extraterrestrial spacecraft. At number 7, the Cape Girardeau, Missouri UFO crash. The crash details of this case were sent to researcher Leo Stringfield by Charlotte Mann, who had received a deathbed confession from her grandmother who was dying of cancer. Her grandfather was Reverend William Huffman, who was pastor of the Red Star Baptist Church. Huffman claimed that he was summoned to pray over crash victims outside of Cape Girardeau, Missouri in 1941. Huffman was driven to the woods outside of town, which he recalls as being a 10 to 15 mile trip. The scene was surreal. Policemen, fire department personnel, FBI agents, and photographers. The mass of emergency crewmen were all viewing what appeared to be a crash site. He was soon asked to come and pray over the dead bodies. As he moved through the scene, his attention was drawn to a strange craft. Huffman was shocked. He was looking at a disc-shaped object. He quickly took a look inside and first noticed what appeared to be hieroglyphic-like writings. He could not understand the meaning of the strange writing. Even stranger were the bodies. Not human as he expected, but small, alien-looking bodies with large heads, big eyes, only a hint of mouth or ears, we've heard this before, and totally without hair. He was sworn to secrecy by military personnel after performing his Christian duties. At number 6, the Kingman, Arizona UFO crash. Famed researcher Raymond Fowler first broke the details of this event of May 20th, 1953 in 1973. Now, Fowler stated that his information came from engineer Fritz Werner, later identified as Arthur G. Stansel. Now, Stansel graduated from Ohio University in 1949 and was first employed by Air Materiel Command at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, as a mechanical engineer on testing Air Force aircraft engines. Stansel signed a legal affidavit vouching to the honesty of his testimony, which was released by Ray Fowler in UFO Magazine, April 1976. I didn't even realize the magazine was around that long, but it has been. Good for you guys. He was working for a company that had been a government contract at a nuclear test site in Nevada. Ooh, sounds familiar. He was summoned by his boss on May 21st, 1953, and sent on a, quote, secret assignment. After being flown to Phoenix, Arizona, he was placed on a bus with blacked out windows and taken to a point some 4 hours' drive northwest of the city of Phoenix proper. The location was supposedly near the city of Kingman, Arizona. The bus was full of passengers, none of whom Stansel knew and would not know, as they were told not to communicate with each other. Sound familiar? Arriving at their secret destination, 2 military light ales illuminated a surreal scene in the late-night pre-dawn skies of the desert. The engineer was amazed to see a disc-shaped craft embedded into the sand. Stansel estimated its diameter to be about 30 feet. Military personnel surrounded the aluminum-like craft, which was brought down by either an internal explosion or was hit by military rockets. The wound was easily seen, a gaping hole in its side. Stansel's duty was to calculate the speed of the craft, a task he quickly discharged. Afterwards, the tense atmosphere of the group of investigators began to loosen some, and he began to glean details some of the other personnel assigned to this off-the-record mission. He was told of a small cabin inside the craft and very small chairs. He did not get to look inside the unknown craft himself. He was taken aback when he peeked into a nearby medical tent. Inside was the small body of a creature about 4 foot tall. He asserts that the alien was wearing a type of skull cap and a silver suit. The suit seemed to be seamless. Soon the investigation was called to a halt and the members summoned to leave the area. Back on the bus, all of the members of the assignment were ordered to sign the, quote, Official Secrets Act, and were warned not to discuss what they had seen with anyone. Before bringing the crash story to other UFO groups, Fowler did a thorough background check on Stansel and was satisfied to his authenticity and personal integrity. Fowler maintains that several other witnesses have come forward in the years following the incident, but the lack of other facts and other testimony leave the case anecdotal and conjectural. Coming in at number 5, the Shag Harbor, Nova Scotia UFO crash. On the night of October 4th, 1967, at about 11:20 p.m. Atlantic Daylight Time, it was reported that something had crashed into the waters of the Gulf of Maine near Shag Harbor. At least 11 people saw a low-flying lit object head towards the harbor. Now, multiple witnesses reported hearing a whistling sound, quote, like a boom, like a bomb, then a whoosh, and finally a loud bang. The object was never officially identified and was therefore referred to as an unidentified flying object in Government of Canada documents. The Canadian military became involved in a subsequent rescue/recovery effort. The initial report was made by local resident Laurie Wickens and 4 of his friends driving through Shag Harbor on Highway 3. They spotted a large object descending into the waters off the harbor. Attaining a better vantage point, Wickens and his friends saw an object floating offshore in the Gulf of Maine. Wickens contacted the RCMP detachment in Barrington Passage and reported he had seen a large airplane or small airliner crash into the Gulf of Maine. The impact was investigated by various agencies of the Government of Canada. The RCN conducted at least one underwater search to attempt to locate the remains of any associated objects. Now, the Government of Canada declared that no known aircraft was involved and the source of the impact remains unknown to this day. It is one of the very few cases where government agency documents have formally declared an unidentified flying object was involved. Several military witnesses that were interviewed, including an RCN diver involved in the search, have claimed an alien spacecraft was responsible. It was also claimed by several of the witnesses that units of the United States Armed Forces were involved in the search. The case was also briefly investigated by the U.S. Condon Committee UFO study, which offered no explanation. And it gets stranger. At number 4, the Braxton County UFO crash. The Flatwoods Monster, also known as the Braxton County Monster or the Phantom of Flatwoods, is an alleged unidentified extraterrestrial reported to have been sighted in the town of Flatwoods in Braxton County, West Virginia, United States on September 12, 1952. Stories of the creature are an example of a close encounter of the third kind. Various descriptions of a second entity also exist. Most agree that it was at least 10 feet tall and that it had a red face which appeared to glow from within, and a green body. Now, witnesses described the creature's head as having bulging, non-human eyes and as either being shaped like a heart or as having a large heart-shaped cowling behind it. The creature's body was described as being man-shaped and clad in a dark pleated skirt, later described as being green. Some accounts recorded that the creature had no visible arms, while others describe it as having short, stubby arms, ending in long, claw-like fingers, which protruded from the front of its body. Associated with the Flatwoods Monster is a craft described as a large, pulsating red ball of light that hovered above or rested upon the ground. Now, ufologists believe that it may have been a powered craft that was piloted by the second entity. At 7:15 p.m. on September 12, 1952, two brothers witnessed a bright object cross the sky. The object appeared to come to rest on land belonging to a local farmer. Now, Sheriff Carr and his deputies searched the area separately, but reported finding no trace of the encounter. After encountering the creature, several members of the group reported being overcome with sickness, which persisted for some time, which they attributed to having been exposed to the mist emitted by the creature. The symptoms included irritation of the nose and swelling of the throat. One man suffered from vomiting and convulsions throughout the night and had difficulties with his throat for several weeks. A doctor who has treated several of the witnesses is reported to have described their symptoms as being similar to victims of mustard gas. Number 3, the Aurora, Texas UFO crash. The Aurora, Texas UFO incident reportedly occurred on April 17, 1897 in Aurora, Texas. The incident, similar to the more famous Roswell UFO incident 50 years later, reportedly resulted in a fatality from the crash. The alleged alien body is reportedly buried in an unmarked grave at the local cemetery. During the 1896 through 1897 time frame, some 6 or 7 years before the Wright brothers' first flight, numerous sightings of a cigar-shaped mysterious airship were reported across the United States. The alleged UFO is said to have hit a windmill on the property of a Judge J.S. Proctor 2 days earlier at around 6 a.m. local time, resulting in its crash. Now, the pilot, who was reported to be not of this world and a, quote, Martian, according to a reported Army officer from nearby Fort Worth, did not survive the crash and was buried, quote, with Christian rites, end quote, at the nearby Aurora Cemetery. The cemetery contains a Texas Historical Commission marker mentioning the incident. Reportedly, wreckage from the crash site was dumped into a nearby well located under the damaged windmill, while some ended up with the alien in the grave. Adding to the mystery was the story of Mr. Brawley Oates, who purchased Judge Proctor's property around 1945. Now, Oates cleaned out the debris from the well in order to use it as a water source, but later developed an extremely severe case of arthritis, which he claimed to be the result of contaminated water from the wreckage dumped into the well. As a result, Oates sealed up the well with a concrete slab and placed an outbuilding across the slab. According to writing on the slab, this was done in 1957. The alien to this day is still in the unmarked grave. At number 2 on our countdown, the Kecksburg UFO crash. December 9, 1965, Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. A large, brilliant fireball was seen by thousands in at least 6 U.S. states. It reportedly dropped hot metal debris over Michigan and northern Ohio, starting some grass fires and caused sonic booms in western Pennsylvania as well. It was generally assumed and reported by the press to be a meteor after authorities discounted other proposed explanations such as a plane crash, errant missile tests, or re-entering satellite debris. However, eyewitnesses in a small village of Kecksburg, about 30 miles southeast of Pittsburgh, claimed something different. They said something crashed in the woods. A boy said he saw the object land while his mother saw a wisp of blue smoke arising from the woods. They alerted local authorities. Now, others from Kecksburg, included local volunteer fire department members, reported finding an object in the shape of an acorn and about as large as a Volkswagen Beetle. Writing resembling Egyptian hieroglyphics was also said to have been in a band around the base of the object. Now, witnesses reported further that the intense military presence, most notably the United States Army, secured the area, ordered civilians out, and then removed the object on a flatbed truck. At the time, however, the military claimed they searched the woods and found, quote, absolutely nothing, end quote. Try telling that one to the people of Kecksburg. And at number 1 on our top 10 UFO crash retrievals of all time, wait for it, the Roswell UFO crash, that's right. Far and away the most notorious of the UFO crash legends is the Roswell UFO incident that reportedly took place in July 1947 when an unknown object crashed on a ranch near Roswell, New Mexico. Now, explanations of what took place are based on both official and unofficial communications, if you can get them. Although the crash is attributed to a secret U.S. military Air Force surveillance balloon by the U.S. government, the most famous explanation of what occurred is that the object was a spacecraft containing extraterrestrial life. Since the late 1970s, the Roswell incident has been the subject of much controversy and much conspiracy theory. The United States Armed Forces maintains that what was recovered near Roswell was debris from the crash of an experimental high-altitude surveillance balloon belonging to what then was classified top secret, a program named Project Mogul. Others maintain that an alien craft was found, its occupants were captured, and that the military engaged in a massive cover-up. The Roswell incident has turned into a widely known pop culture phenomenon, making the name Roswell synonymous with UFOs. Roswell has become the most publicized of all alleged UFO incidents. On July 8, 1947, the Roswell Army Airfield Public Information Office issued a press release stating that the personnel from the field's 509th Operations Group had recovered a, quote, flying disc, end quote. Yes, they did release this in print, which had crashed on a ranch near Roswell. Later that day, the press reported then that Commanding General of the 8th Air Force Roger Ramey had stated that a weather balloon was recovered by the RAF. A press conference was held featuring debris, foil, rubber, and wood, said to be from the crashed object, which seemed to confirm its description as a weather balloon. The incident faded from the attraction of UFO researchers for over 30 years. Now, in 1978, physicist and ufologist, one of my good buds, Stanton T. Friedman, interviewed Major Jesse Marcel, who was involved with the original recovery of the debris in 1947.
I was amazed as to what I saw. The amount of debris that was scattered over such an area. But the more I saw the fragments, the more I realized that it wasn't anything that I was acquainted with. In fact, as it turned out, nobody else was acquainted with it.
In fact, he was the first on the ground. Marcel expressed his belief that the military covered up the recovery of an alien spacecraft. His story spread through UFO circles like wildfire, being featured in some UFO documentaries at the time.
There was a cover-up someplace about this whole matter.
In February 1980, the National Enquirer ran its own interview with Marcel, garnering national and worldwide attention for the Roswell incident. Additional witnesses added significant new details, including claims of a large-scale military operation dedicated to recovering alien craft and aliens themselves at as many as 11 crash sites. In 1989, former mortician Glenn Dennis put forth a detailed personal account wherein he claimed alien autopsies were carried out at the Roswell base. Of course, the notorious Roswell crash legend has spawned the popular aliens from space perception of UFOs. But in his book, The Day After Roswell, Colonel Philip Corso revealed military concern that the crashed spacecraft recovered in the New Mexican desert also displayed suspiciously Nazi origins. Conversations with Werner von Braun and Willy Ley in the days after the crash, the similarity between the German Horten wing and the craft they had pulled out of Arroyo was no accident. Dr. Herman Orbith considered, quote, the Roswell craft from the New Mexican desert not a spacecraft, but a time machine. Therefore, perhaps the EBs described in the medical autopsies reports were humanoid robots rather than life forms, specifically engineered for long-distance time travel and space flight. End quote. Well, there you have it. The top 10 UFO crash retrievals of all time. I bet you thought Roswell was the only one. Sometimes we have to just dig a little deeper. Think we missed one? Leave a comment in the section below, because you know we're always listening. I'm Jesse Randolph Singer for UFO TV, and I want to thank you for watching. We'll see you all next time.
Openly admitted to anybody, including the senior officers on the base.
Another was former NATO head and UK Chief of the Defence Staff, Lord Peter Hill Norton.
If indeed what he says took place did take place, and why on earth should he make it up, then surely the entry of a vehicle from outer space, certainly not man-made, to a defence base in this country also cannot fail to be of defence interest.
However, when the file was released in 2001, it turned out to consist mostly of internal correspondence and responses to inquiries from the public. Now, skeptics note that the lack of in-depth investigation in the publicly released documents is consistent with the MOD's earlier statements that they never took the case seriously. Included in the released files is an explanation given by the defense minister as to why the MOD did not investigate further. The sightings have been officially dismissed as misinterpretation. Hey, Jesse Randolph Singer here with UFO TV. Today we're going to be presenting you with the top 10 UFO crash retrievals of all time. Now I know you're thinking to yourself, I know about Roswell, I know about 1947. Well, guess again. There's been a plethora of ET craft that have crashed on this planet. So today we're going to present you with the top 10 cases, the top 10 UFO crash retrievals of all time. Come on, let's do it. Coming in at number 10, the Rendlesham Forest UK UFO crash. The Rendlesham Forest incident is the name given to a series of reported sightings of unexplained lights and the alleged landing of a craft or multiple craft of unknown origin in Rendlesham Forest, Suffolk, England in late December 1980. Just outside RAF Woodbridge, used at the time of a series of nocturnal events, a fireball, the Orford Ness Lighthouse, and bright stars. Come on. But according to eyewitness testimony, around 3 a.m. on the 26th of December 1980, strange lights were reported by a security patrol near the east gate of RAF Woodbridge. Now these are experts, apparently descending into nearby Rendlesham Forest. Servicemen initially thought it was a downed aircraft, but upon entering the forest to investigate, they saw, according to Halt's memo, this is the base commander, a strange glowing object, metallic and triangular in appearance, with colored lights. As they approached, it moved through the trees, and the animals on the nearby farm went into a frenzy. The craft left 3 impressions or depressions in the ground that were visible the next day. Now, one of the servicemen, this is important, Sergeant Jim Peniston by the United States Air Force. Now, dozens of United States Air Force personnel were eyewitnesses to various events over a 2 to 3 day period. It is the most famous UFO event to have ever happened in Britain. It's basically their Roswell, ranking among the best known UFO cases worldwide as well. Now, the UK Ministry of Defense denied that the event posed any threat to national security. They also stated it was never investigated as a security matter at all. Later, evidence indicated there was a substantial MOD file on the subject, which led to claims of a cover-up. Some interpreted this as part of a larger pattern of information suppression concerning the true nature of unidentified flying objects by both the United States and the British governments. One person to take this view was eyewitness and deputy base commander at the time, Colonel Charles Halt.
The aftermath is quite interesting. It's very obvious there was a great deal more interest than was ever publicly or